I want to welcome each and every one of you to the Skylight Gallery. It's good to see some of these familiar faces, and it's even better seeing some of the new people. Not that the familiar faces are unwelcome, but we know you'll always be here. It's the new people that we really appreciate having taken the time out to come and join us. So, Medicine from Heaven. That's the title of this exhibition, subtitled,
How African American culture cured the USA.
That's a teaser. How African American culture cured the USA. This exhibition is, for me at least, in the process of co-curating, one of the more satisfying exhibitions we've done this year. And I attribute that to the artist Soul Sax and the scholarship he's brought to these works, to each individual piece. And hopefully everyone will take the time to read the texts and contemplate the images. A lot of what this show is about is going to be shared with you by Soul Sax and Danny Simmons. And what I will do is introduce Brooklyn's Danny Simmons, our Danny Simmons. This is our champion group. All right, thank you.
I met Saul in '94 when I was running a gallery in Tribeca called Annex. I became familiar with his work, and I've been a fan and collecting it ever since. I got more Soul Sax work in my house than anybody else. People come in and get jealous. Like, well, how come you got 9 Soul Saxes up on the wall? Because it's that good. His work is really good. It's really well thought out. But this will be the first time I'm really going to drill down and figure out exactly what he's talking about. Because I'm very compelled by the images. But I think this time I want to know what's behind it. And where Saul's actually coming from. So I understand in the way that he understands the work. I understand it visually, and I think I understand some of what's behind it, but there's so much more. And we're going to find out why this is medicine from heaven.
That's a good thing to start with. So why medicine from heaven? And then we'll get into the second part. Exactly. Well, basically it's a reference to the Congo cultural tradition of Nkisi. As Robert Ferris Thompson and Daniel Dawson, who's in the audience right now, have written, Nkisi is medicine brought down from the heavens by a soul, by an ancestral soul. This ancestral soul is bringing a medicine that can be a herbal medicine to cure actual physical ailment, but it also could be a skill or a concept to cure your cultural ailments. For me, African American culture has brought down all of these retentions from Africa, these musical retentions, these retentions in dance, these retentions in language, retentions in fashion. All of these retentions have been used to change European culture and to most importantly confront European racism. And in doing so, over generations, they have, in a mostly nonviolent way, undermined European supremacy in a country that was basically founded on the notion of European supremacy.
No, that's the concept. But how do these individual objects relate to that concept? Well, are these Nkisi? Are these objects Nkisi? Do they act as conduits? Tell us about that.
Well, this image all the way on the end of Robert Johnson, you know, he was this incredible blues man that basically founded the genre. And he always said that I got my skills, that I got my ability, that I got this cultural expression from a lay-by at the crossroads. This idea of a lay-by at the crossroads, which is a Yoruba concept, but here in the Americas got fused with the Congo concept of being able to cross the road and get to heaven so that you could get medicine, so that you could get ancestral knowledge that will help you in your difficult situation here on earth. So when I go ahead and put a mask of a lay-by on Robert Johnson's face. I'm basically saying that no, he did not sell his soul to the devil, but his soul was probably still chilling and jamming and partying in the lake. You know what I'm saying? And that's what the piece is about. The piece is about changing these cultural archetypes to actually reflect the positive and playful and creative nature of African American culture with its African intentions.
Cool. I get that. But how did you get to that place? I mean, there's so many things that one can pick up on. There's so many themes and issues, contemporary issues. How did you get to the place where you were reaching back into African culture? And how did you make that connection between what we're doing here as Africans in America, African Americans? How did that connection come to you, and how do you express that?
Well, when I was coming up, I felt that Germany was like the supreme culture. I really did. I felt that European culture all the world over, took over the world. Nobody was able to stop them. And the Germans were the baddest Europeans they were. So from a young age, I wanted to go to Germany. I wanted to go to Berlin. I wanted to understand German culture. I wanted to understand this juggernaut that I felt had, taken over the world. You know what I'm saying? I mean, in my freshman year at Cooper Union, the whole curriculum was German. It was Auer's Bauhaus design, Auer's color theory. You know what I'm saying? So when I finally got out to Europe and really started to understand German culture, it was just another group of humans to me. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't anything superior or anything to be hated, I felt. In fact, one thing that really struck out to me was I went to visit a friend's house who happened to have been a baron, and she had a book that dated her family back to the year 1100. And I was shocked by this history she had. And my jaw's on the ground, and she looks at me and curls her lip. And I'm like, what's wrong? I mean, look at all this beautiful history you have. She's like, it ain't beautiful to me, though. To me, the supremacy that those ancestors of mine believed in caused so much pain and so much hardship. I reject it. I don't want to have anything to do with that history. And that blew me away. To me, that would be like a daughter of the Civil War renouncing her connection to her Confederate ancestors because she was so disgusted by slavery. But that just doesn't happen in the States. In Europe, I saw that happen. And her response got me thinking, well, why am I here studying her ancestors, studying her culture, when I don't even know my own? I don't know what my people were doing in 1100. I had no clue. I had no clue of what was going on in Africa in 1100. So when I got back from Germany, I decided, okay, all right, I understand the oppressor. I understand what was going on in Europe. I understand the European worldview. Let me try to learn another worldview. And I was lucky enough to get in touch with Dan Dawson at the Caribbean Cultural Center just when I got back. This was 91, well actually 90, and Dan sat me down and had me start reading books, basically introduced me to John Mason and John Mason's work. John Mason is an amazing author and cultural leader. A Bible Orisha of 25 years in Europe. And his books and books by others like Robert Ferris Johnson, who I got to study with at Yale, they opened the door on a different worldview. All of a sudden I had a different lens through which to look at reality, other than the European lens that I grew up with. And these works come directly out of being able to see the world through an African or Africanized worldview.
You know, you mentioned Yale, and one of the things that, you know, amazes me is your educational history, and how I've always wanted to know, you know, how institutions, if at all, shape the way you think about art, and the way you were able to place and juxtaposition cultures. How do you manage to put those two together to become the artist that you are today?
Well, you know, my experience at both Cooper and Yale, when I started in Cooper to make this body of work, actually, you know, it started off as ceramic heads, and it's the same body of work. It's you know, I'm calling on these souls from heaven to come down and basically express these African pretensions that have been lost, are forgotten, are dismissed. And what I found was that a lot of my classmates and a lot of my professors would ask, well, you know, why should I have to learn all of this stuff about Africa? Seriously, you know, I mean, why should I have to learn about Chongo and he was the fourth Alafin of the Oyo Empire? What good is that information to me? And I would turn to them and I'd say, well, I know who Aristotle is. I know who Zeus is. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we giggle, but we all know who Thor is. You know what I'm saying? The fact of the matter is that it's part of our human cultural legacy for us to know about what happened in Africa in 1100, just like we know about what happened in Europe in 1100. And we should know this all around the world, you know, and we shouldn't be afraid of assimilating language and culture and learning to be more of who we are, which is the many cultures we're made of, you know? And of course, you know, my point would always be to folks that were really resistant is that the American culture you love is full of this African culture. The art world that you love, Picasso, straight through to Warhol, all are working with African motifs of abstraction, of conceptual art, of found objects, of you name it. These are motifs that you find in sub-Saharan Africa, and these motifs influence that whole European expression. So why shouldn't you go ahead and find the significant details of those cultures that have given you these overarching motifs that have taken over modern culture?
Well, that's what you brought to them. I can see that might have put you in awe with a few of your professors.
One or two, yeah.
But what did you take from those experiences that you reflect in your art? Because, you know, in order to have gotten out of there, you would have to have emulated in some way, shape, or form, and incorporated some of their ideals. I mean, you're not doing straight up African sculpture. You're doing a hybrid, at least in my opinion. Absolutely. You're doing a hybrid of what you learned in school, what you learned in culture here, and melding it. How did you put that all together? I mean, how did school help you with that?
Well, one of the things that school really helps you with is being able to meet a lot of folks that do what you do before you really start getting into it. So I got to sit down with folks like Hans Hackler, who was one of the fathers of conceptual art, and he would take me through his art historical arc. You know, and that's what I love about artists who are really serious about what they do. They all have an art historical arc. They all have an art historical narrative that they follow that leads to what they do today. You know what I'm saying? So with Hans Hackler, it begins with Marcel Duchamp. And he talks about Marcel Duchamp and the importance of assemblage, the importance of resisting supremacy, the importance of resisting the violence of European supremacy, basically. He grew up in Germany during the war. So basically for me, regardless of whether an artist is working right out of the cultural lens that I'm working out of, learning their cultural lens enriches my own cultural lens. Learning their art and how they see the history of the art world enriches my own way of speaking about art. You know, of course, if I was Hans, I wouldn't start with Duchamp. I would start with, you know, the Yoruba and Congo. You know what I'm saying? Because that is where simply started. You know,
You follow that up.
exactly.
Now, that's what I was going to get to the next question, this art thing. I've been following your work since 93, 94. Is it the same thing that you're doing now? Are you saying the same thing? Have you changed your work? I mean, I know the images change as you move along, but is any of the framework or the conceptual concept of what your work is, has that changed, or are you just getting deeper into it?
I'm just getting deeper into it. Soul Saint Josephine Baker is a carnival character that was in my senior thesis show at Yale. So this is a character that I've been working on for more than 20 years now. And basically, to me, these carnival characters have the potential of being a transmitter of that information through entertainment, which is always the way in which we are most happy to receive information, is through entertainment, is being able to get down there, you know?
To get jiggy with it.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, look at the amount of information that's transmitted through hip hop. You know what I'm saying? One song, they can transmit a whole narrative right quick, and the kids learn every single word. You know what I'm saying?
I got a question for you. When I met you, I think the first time we went on an art experience together, you were setting things up. You would have clothing, you would have the head, you put it together, you put it in a subway station, this, that, the other. How is technology? That wasn't around then.
Yeah.
The internet was like, you know, and Photoshop on it.
Yeah.
You were making the head. How has technology changed the way you approach your art making practice?
Well, I had more resources then. I was doing ceramic heads then. These are all resin that I'm doing now, and then the digital, these digital montages are almost sketches for what I used to put together in a whole costume. You know, I basically would take the ceramic head and make a mannequin form, which I call my mannequin. You know what I'm saying? So it's this idea of not being pure, of being made of many kinships to people, of being a free kin, a married kin, and working against your peon mentality. So all of this is word driven. So therefore I can move from what I was doing back in the 90s, where I was making street installations, to doing digital montage, to doing assemblage, and still have a seamless conceptual thread that holds all of those very different expressions together.
One of the things that you did in the early 2000s and late 90s, and the show that you had at Rush Arts, really delved into the relationship between African culture and hip-hop culture in the Ecuador. Could you tell us a little bit about how hip-hop has influenced your work?
Hip-hop is central to my work. I mean, part of the reason why I went to Germany to begin with, part of the reason why I got initiated into Europe, it all goes back to the 5%ers, you know, back to those days in the 70s, when the 5%ers hit the street.
Could you explain what the 5% for those people who don't know? Not everybody knows what the 5%. I happen to be from the hood. God.
What a guy.
What God. And so I happen to know what the 5%ers are. But there might be people who don't have a clue what you're talking about. So let's hit them up with the 5%ers.
When, I'll go off by how I found out about the 5%. I was a little kid, maybe 8 years old, playing in the schoolyard with a whole bunch of other kids, and all of a sudden, this grown man in a suit, straight up fit suit, came up into the playground and said, all you children, gather around, form a circle. I'm here to tell you that you're God, that each one of you are God Almighty. You're the black man, the original man on earth, and we're going to sit down and decipher right now and find out what that black man is. What is God? Because it ain't that mystery God that you've been told about. And that was my introduction to the 5%ers. They were a sect of the Nation of Islam that were too militant for the Nation of Islam. So they were the jail sect of the Nation of Islam. And they were deep. But one thing that they left me with was this idea of a life book. Your life book in the 5% religion, your life book is a book that's going to describe your particular path to being God. Your particular way in which you claim to be God. And it takes work. You have to do your research, you have to make your arguments, you know what I'm saying? And that was my thing. You know, at first, my argument was with the 5% because they said the white man's the devil. And I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, I have some white teachers. They're not so bad. And I know some black thugs that aren't so godly. You know what I'm saying? You know, but then it became this issue of what is God? And that's where my name came out. A lot of hip hop, I mean, people talk about Method Man and the Jizza and Genius, and these are all 5% righteous names. They were 5%ers making an argument as to what God is and why that they are that God. And my argument is that God is solid, that God is something that does not see a difference between you and me. The air, the ground, the people are all one thing, a solid whole rock that is immovable and untouchable. You know? And that's where I got my name. Soul's Axe is short for solid as a brass axe.
Okay, so how did it get into your work? How did it reflect it into your work, if not in this body of work, but along the line?
Well, in this body of work, I'm kind of digging to the roots of hip hop. Right. The blues, to me, is the deep root of hip hop. You know, when you listen to Robert Johnson, when you listen to Muddy Waters, you're listening to a commentary on what was going on in the streets at that time. Leadbelly has this amazing blues song called The Bourgeoisie Blues, where he talks about Washington, D.C. is a bougie town. You can't go up into a movie theater in that town. They'll throw you. You know what I'm saying? I mean, talking about the racism of D.C. in the 20s. And you hear this in this blues song, and it sounds like hip-hop. It sounds like hip-hoppers talking about getting stopped in Christie in the 90s. You know, this is a cultural weapon. This is a cultural tool given to us by our ancestors to confront social inequities. And we confront those social inequities with the creative, mindful of game that we get from our cultural heritage.
The last body of work, I got a bunch of basketball and the footballs and the sports icon, and then you can see some of that in Billie Holiday. Not Billie Holiday, Joseph Baker. Why the basketballs and the footballs and the...
They're a symbol of what I was just talking about, that game. In Yoruba, there's actually a prayer for the head. Orimi Akwere. Orimi Akwere. I invite game into my head. I invite creativity into my head. I want to have a head full of game, a head full of creativity, a head full of stop short, zigzag, and come out all different altogether kind of game. I want to be able to create a spectacle with nothing but 2 spoons and a rubber band. You know what I'm saying? That kind of game. And to me, using the basketball and representing it as the mind, as this fruitful mind, brothers, right in line with the Yoruba analogies about hair being the creative game of a person popping out of their skull. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's definitely a symbol of red, E-red, which means game, it can mean the spectacle of the masquerade is called Chi-Ren. And what you have there is an artist that's able to take a concept and express that concept in many different mediums, through many different ways. So you'll have a concept about Yemoja, about how she turns in circles like the sea. And then the dancers are turning in circles like the sea. And then the sculptures turning in circles like the sea. You know, so you have this endless, infinite mirror of different mediums, all reflecting the same concept. And that is E-ray, that is game.
Trying to put you in the contemporary. Who else out here who do work like yours? Is there anybody else?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Vengeance. Oh, I can't believe she's the first person I have to give a shout out to. Yes, of her work.
Work that I had at
Exactly. Vengeance is her last name.
Right.
She's a painter, and basically she started to put together African icons with African art before I did this body of work. And Margaret Rose Ventures. Yes, exactly. Thank you. And basically, this is something that happens with us as artists. I was in my own process going to talk about my characters, and I fumbled upon what she was already doing, and I decided I could go ahead and do this because, how many still lifes were being done by how many artists during, you know what I'm saying? And my basic feeling was that her body of work, which was in color, we weren't dealing with the same icons.
She was dealing with records.
Exactly.
Record icons.
Exactly. Music icons, and she was dealing with them.
And only female figures.
Yes, yeah, very true, very true. So I figured that there was enough room for these two bodies of work to hang together. But yeah, as an African American artist, you're mining the same materials as every other artist around. You know what I'm saying? So even if you have two pieces that look very different from each other, their concepts or underpinning ideas can be exactly the same. Which is what I'm seeing happening a lot, not only with artists here in the United States, but I see that happening with Brazilian artists and Cuban. We both can sit down and find the same concepts in each other's work and say, hey, we're just expressing it in a different way. And then there's other artists whose work looks very similar to my work, like Margaret Ventures, and the concepts are different. The underpinning concepts are not the same.
Right.
So it's one of those things that you really got to look further than just the initial image. You got to look into what the artist is speaking about and how it pertains to that art, to that narrative that we're all pointing to, that art historical narrative that proves that this is what we should be doing at this time.
Where are you going with this, man? I mean, you're here now, and we're looking at this, and it's an amazing. Where do you leave? Do you have a path that you mapped out?
Absolutely. All of this work is working towards the carnival. I want Soul Saint to come marching in. I want to have full body masks, and really do it out live. I mean, this is another situation where there's some difficulty because you have an artist like Nick Cave. You know what I'm saying? And Nick's work is incredible. He's doing the full body masquerade that I'm looking to do. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of the materials he's using and a lot of the images he's using are exactly what I want to use. But the content that I want to put into it is different. You know what I'm saying? And that's the fight, is to be able to, find your space and be allowed to do your thing, even though it might overlap with what somebody else is doing.
Everybody's stuff overlaps.
That's the truth. painters always come across different motifs that work, and they just their hand expresses it differently and keeps that contrast between the two bodies of work.
I'm going to ask you one final question. Do you find that your work is more grounded in spirit or in intellect?
Well, honestly, Danny, I feel that intellect is spirit.
Okay.
I feel that the soul ain't nothing but a mind. You know what I'm saying? And what we look for with the spiritual content, yes, there's something unspeakable, something that could never be verbalized in some spiritual expressions. But I still feel that it is an intellectual process, that it isn't something that is instinctual. It isn't something that you just do. I feel that it's something that you become a part of by working towards it, intelligently, you know?
Okay. Then the question is, could somebody, without being versed in all the things that you've been versed in to get you to this point, walk upon your work and feel what you're doing without having intellectualized it the way you do?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, there are some things that can't be verbalized, and that's why I'm looking towards making images. That's why I'm looking towards making sounds. That's why I'm looking towards making movements. That's why I'm looking to express things in as many different mediums as possible, so that I can get to that medium, that medium which no one can quantify, that's too ephemeral to be spoken about, but everyone
Can get there.
everyone feels it. It makes an impact on everyone immediately. It's tactile, it's visceral.
You know, I did, that last statement did take me on one more question. I thought I was but you just, why are you an artist, man?
It's the best form of self-defense that I can find in this world.